Many thousands of years ago, there was a master priest and scholar named Brihaspati, revered in the divine realm for his wisdom. Indra, the king of the gods, appointed him as his official priest, for rituals were of paramount importance during this era of Dwapara Yuga. It was a time when people used rituals and specific substances to influence their own lives and surroundings. Brihaspati was married to Tara, whose name meant star. In the ancient order, a wife held equal importance in the sacred rituals, ensuring that no ritual could be performed without her presence. This societal arrangement ensured that women were deeply respected. They were integral to the spiritual and practical life of their husbands. A man's blessings, his passage to heaven, even his ultimate liberation, mukti, were intertwined with his wife's role beside him. In this time, these norms protected women from neglect, misuse, or oppression, as they were essential to the rituals and the spiritual journey of men. Brihaspati, despite his high status as the god's priest, relied on Tara for his spiritual practices. However, he was unfaithful and inattentive in his marriage. Observing this, Tara, disillusioned by Brihaspati, fell in love with Chandra, the moon god. Chandra reciprocated her feelings, and their love blossomed into a deep romance, eventually leading Tara to elope with him. This act outraged Brihaspati. For him, Tara's departure threatened not only his marital relationship, but his social standing and divine connections. Desperate to restore his position, he approached Indra, demanding Tara's return, warning that without her, he would refuse to perform the rituals. Under pressure, Indra intervened and insisted Tara return to Brihaspati, asserting that her dharma lay with her husband, regardless of her love for Chandra. Reluctantly, Tara complied and returned. In her absence, however, Tara had become pregnant. When questioned, she refused to reveal the father's identity, even as crowds gathered, eager to know. Finally, the unborn child spoke from within her womb, asking, "Whose child am I?" Impressed by this unborn soul's wisdom and determination to know its origin, the people persuaded Tara to reveal the truth. She then admitted that the child was Chandra's. The child was born and named Buddha, after the planet Mercury. But Brihaspati, angered by his wife's infidelity, cursed the child to be neither male nor female. As Buddha grew, they struggled with questions of identity and purpose. Torn between different paths, Buddha wondered if they should live as a man or a woman, whether to pursue asceticism or a conventional life. To this, Tara offered reassurance, saying, "The universe has room for stars, for every kind of being, neither just men nor women, gods nor demons. In this vast creation, there will be space and a life for you too. Simply be, and life will reveal itself in time." One day, King Sudyumna ventured deep into the forest where Shiva and Parvati dwelt, eager for a day of hunting. Observing the creatures around her, Parvati suddenly spoke, "My love for you is so boundless that I feel even these majestic beings, bull elephants, lions with their grand manes, peacocks with their splendid feathers, are a kind of insult to you. I wish for a forest where there is no male but you." Shiva, amused and touched, replied, "As you wish," and with a mere thought, transformed all the creatures in the forest into females. The mighty lions turned into lionesses, bull elephants into cow elephants, peacocks into peahens, and unexpectedly, King Sudyumna himself became a woman. King Sudyumna, now a woman, looked upon this sudden transformation with disbelief. Once a proud king and courageous hunter, he found himself robbed of his former self. He cried out in despair, "Who has cast such a curse upon me?" Wandering the forest in confusion, he eventually stumbled upon Shiva and Parvati, entwined in romance. Falling at Shiva's feet, Sudyumna pleaded, "I am a king with a family and a kingdom. I came here as a man, and now I stand before you as a woman. How can I return to my life like this?" Shiva, unable to reverse the transformation, offered a compromise. "I cannot undo what has been done, but I can offer a remedy. When the moon wanes, you shall be a woman. When it waxes, you shall be a man." Accepting this fate, Sudyumna chose to remain in the forest and came to be known as Ella, living as both male and female, depending on the moon's cycle. It was during this time that Ella encountered Buddha, a union fated to bring forth the ChandraVamshis, the dynasty of the moon. These children, born of dual nature, were unique, embodying creativity, deep emotion, and a certain unpredictability, qualities that distinguished the ChandraVamshis from the resolute, warrior-like Suryavamshis, descendants of the sun. In contrast to the disciplined and valiant ChandraVamshis, the ChandraVamshis were known for their changeability, creativity, and even occasional instability. The Kurus, later known for their tumultuous reign and emotional entanglements, were part of this lineage. Among the descendants of Buddha and Ila was Nahusha, who rose to great power. Once, Nahusha was summoned to Devaloka, the celestial abode of Indra, to oversee in Indra's absence. Entrusted with this responsibility, Nahusha became prideful, reveling in his newfound authority. He indulged himself, summoning any Apsara he desired, and even set his sights upon Shachi, Indra's own consort. When Shachi resisted his advances, Nahusha devised a plan, ordering the revered Saptarishis to carry him in a palanquin to her. In his arrogance, he demanded they hasten their pace, even striking Agastya Muni, one of the rishis, in impatience. Agastya, incensed by this hubris, cursed him. "You have become so base, unworthy of Devaloka and even of your human form. Become a python." And so Nahusha was cast down from the celestial realms, transformed into a lowly python. Nahusha's lineage continued through his sons, Yati and Yayati. Yati, with his sharp intellect, withdrew from worldly life to seek spiritual ascendance in the Himalayas, while Yayati embraced his role as a king, thus continuing the lineage of the ChandraVamshis. In this era, the rivalry between the Devas and Asuras intensified. Brihaspati served as the spiritual guide of the Devas, and Shukracharya of the Asuras, whose advantage lay in Shukracharya's possession of the Sanjeevani mantra, a powerful incantation capable of reviving fallen warriors. This ability gave the Asuras an unassailable edge, as their forces would rise anew after each day's battle. To counter this, Brihaspati's son Kacha approached Shukracharya, hoping to learn the secret of the Sanjeevani. Though the Asuras suspected Kacha's intentions and urged Shukracharya to refuse, he accepted him as a disciple, bound by the custom of teaching those deemed worthy. Kacha served diligently, catching the eye of Shukracharya's daughter, Devayani, who grew fond of him. Yet Kacha remained focused on his mission, oblivious to Devayani's affection, knowing the Asuras were suspicious of him. In their hostility, the Asuras seized Kacha one day, killing him and casting his remains to the forest animals. Distraught, Devayani begged her father to revive him. Yielding to her pleas, Shukracharya used the Sanjeevani to resurrect Kacha. Later, the Asuras, determined to prevent Kacha's return, ground his remains and mixed them into Shukracharya's wine. Upon drinking it, Shukracharya unwittingly swallowed Kacha. When Devayani once again beseeched him to revive Kacha, Shukracharya felt Kacha's presence within him. Realizing the predicament, he finally imparted the Sanjeevani mantra to Kacha within his own body. Kacha used the mantra to burst forth from Shukracharya, reviving himself, while also bringing Shukracharya back to life. When Kacha prepared to leave, Devayani pleaded with him to stay, confessing her love. Kacha, however, refused her, explaining, "I am your father's disciple, and that binds us as siblings. Furthermore, having emerged from your father, he is like my mother, which also makes us family." Heartbroken, Devayani watched him depart, carrying with him the knowledge of the Sanjeevani that would aid the Devas in the battles to come. Devayani and Sharmishta were close friends. Sharmishta, the daughter of Vrishaparva, the Asura king, and Devayani, the daughter of Shukracharya, a Brahmin priest, shared a deep friendship despite their contrasting backgrounds. One day, as the two young women bathed in the river, they carefully placed their clothes and jewelry separately, a custom reflecting their social hierarchy. While they played in the water, a sudden gust of wind scattered their clothes. As they emerged from the river, Sharmishta accidentally put on Devayani's garments. Seizing the moment to assert her higher status, Devayani teased Sharmishta, asking if it was appropriate for a princess to wear the clothes of her father's guru's daughter. Though Sharmishta initially recognized her mistake, she grew angry, retorting that Devayani's father was but a beggar who relied on her own father's generosity. In her fury, Sharmishta pushed Devayani into a hole and left her there. Devastated, Devayani returned to her father, Shukracharya, seeking retribution. Moved by her distress, Shukracharya demanded that Sharmishta become his daughter's maidservant. Vrishaparva, fearing the loss of Shukracharya's powerful abilities, reluctantly agreed, making Sharmishta a servant to Devayani. As Devayani's marriage to Yayati was arranged, she insisted that Sharmishta accompany her as a maidservant. Though now a servant, Sharmishta maintained her dignity and carried herself with such poise that Yayati grew captivated by her. Despite his marriage to Devayani, Yayati and Sharmishta secretly fell in love, and she bore him a son named Puru. Upon discovering this, Shukracharya cursed Yayati, stripping him of his youth. When Yayati pleaded with his eldest son, Yadu, to exchange his youth for his father's old age, Yadu refused. Enraged, Yayati cursed Yadu, declaring he would never become king. Puru, however, voluntarily offered his youth to his father. Yayati lived in youth once again, and when his desires were finally spent, he returned his youth to Puru, making him the heir to his kingdom. Thus, Puru became the progenitor of the Kuru dynasty, while Yadu's lineage gave rise to the Yadavas. In the line of King Puru's descendants, there was a powerful king named Vishwamitra, also known as Kaushika. Fascinated by the rishis and their immense spiritual power, he began to feel that the authority of a king paled in comparison. Although born into royalty, he aspired to become a sage and left his throne to pursue intense austerities in the forest. Seeing Vishwamitra's determination, Indra, the king of the gods, grew concerned that if Vishwamitra succeeded, his own supremacy might be threatened. To disrupt him, Indra sent Menaka, an Apsara skilled in the art of seduction. Her task was to distract Vishwamitra from his spiritual practices, and she succeeded. From their union, a girl child was born. Realizing that his spiritual efforts had been undermined, Vishwamitra left in anger, abandoning both mother and child. Menaka, being an Apsara, was bound to return to her celestial world. Unable to leave the child with Vishwamitra, who had rejected her, she placed the girl on the banks of the Malini River before departing. Some nearby Shakun birds took notice of the abandoned infant and protected her. Sage Kanva, passing by, discovered the unusual sight of birds guarding a child. He took the girl to his ashram and raised her, naming her Shakuntala after the Shakun birds who had first sheltered her. Shakuntala grew into a beautiful young woman. One day, King Dushyanta, returning from a battle, entered the forest in search of game to feed his soldiers. After wounding a large stag, he tracked it and found it under the care of Shakuntala, who nursed it with great compassion. Moved by her beauty and kindness, Dushyanta fell in love with her. With Kanva's blessing, he married her and, as a token of their union, gave her his ring. Duty soon called Dushyanta back to his kingdom. He promised Shakuntala he would return and take her with him. However, while she waited, sage Durvasa visited the ashram. Absorbed in thoughts of her husband, Shakuntala did not notice the sage, who felt slighted by her apparent indifference. In a fit of anger, Durvasa cursed her, saying that the man who occupied her thoughts would forget her. When the others in the ashram explained her situation, the sage softened the curse, adding that Dushyanta would remember her upon seeing a token of their love. Time passed, and Shakuntala bore a son named Bharata, after whom the nation of Bharat, India, would later be named. Kanva eventually advised Shakuntala to seek out Dushyanta and remind him of their marriage and the child they shared. Shakuntala set off for the palace with Bharata, but as they crossed a river, Dushyanta's ring slipped from her finger into the water, unnoticed. Upon reaching the palace, Dushyanta did not recognize her and, angered by her claims, dismissed her and the child. Heartbroken, Shakuntala returned to the forest, where she raised Bharata, who grew up surrounded by wild animals, becoming fearless and strong. Years later, while hunting in the forest, Dushyanta encountered a remarkable young boy playing with lions and riding elephants. Surprised by the child's strength and grace, he inquired about his identity. The boy introduced himself as Bharata, son of Dushyanta. Eventually, sage Kanva revealed the full story to the king, and Dushyanta, finally realizing the truth, brought Shakuntala and Bharata to his palace, fulfilling the destiny they had all awaited. Bharata had many sons, but as they reached maturity, he realized they were not suited to rule. In a revolutionary decision for his time, he chose not to make any of his sons his successor, understanding that lineage alone did not qualify someone to be a just and wise king. Bharata's impartiality and commitment to his people were admired, and these virtues later inspired the naming of the nation. Bharata eventually found a worthy successor in Vidura, the son of Mamata and the product of a tragic encounter with Brihaspati, who had forced himself on her. Vidura proved to be a wise and just ruler, governing with balance and fairness, and his legacy continued for 14 generations until the birth of Shantanu, a key figure in the Mahabharata. Shantanu, in a previous life known as Mahabhishek, had ascended to the heavenly realm of Devaloka after a virtuous life. During his stay there, he encountered the goddess Ganga, who in a moment of inadvertent exposure caught his gaze. Unlike the others present, who respectfully averted their eyes, Mahabhishek continued to look upon her, unable to break his stare. Indra, the king of gods, deemed him unworthy of Devaloka for this lapse and sentenced him to be reborn on earth. Observing that Ganga had seemed to enjoy the attention, Indra also decreed that she too would return to the human realm until she was free from pride. In his new life as Shantanu, the king had no memory of his past. Ganga, however, retained her awareness of their prior connection and sought to draw him to her. Shantanu, deeply engrossed in his role as king and an avid hunter, eventually encountered Ganga by the river. Upon seeing her, he fell passionately in love and pleaded with her to become his wife. Ganga agreed, but on one condition. He was never to question her actions. Shantanu accepted, and Ganga became his beloved wife. However, when their first child was born, Ganga took the infant to the river and drowned him. Shantanu was horrified yet restrained himself from questioning her, remembering her stipulation. This tragic pattern repeated 7 times, with Ganga drowning each newborn. On the birth of their 8th child, unable to bear it any longer, Shantanu finally confronted her. Ganga then revealed the reasoning behind her actions. Long ago, 8 celestial beings, known as the Vasis, had been cursed by sage Vasishta for stealing his divine cow, Nandini, under the impulsive urging of Prabhasa's wife. As punishment, the Vasis were condemned to be born as mortals. They had pleaded with Ganga to allow them brief lives on earth, so they could quickly escape the burden of their curse. By drowning each child, she was liberating the Vasis from their earthly existence. However, Shantanu's intervention had spared the 8th Vasu, Prabhasa, who would now live a full human life. Ganga assured Shantanu that she would raise this child, Devavratha, in the finest traditions, preparing him for kingship before returning him to his father. She left with the child, leaving Shantanu desolate. 16 years later, Ganga returned with Devavratha, now an accomplished young man who had studied under the most esteemed teachers, including Parashurama and Brihaspati. Shantanu was overjoyed to see his son, and his sorrow melted away as he coronated Devavratha as the crown prince. With Devavratha shouldering the responsibilities of the kingdom, Shantanu regained his vigor and peace. One day, while hunting, Shantanu's heart was once again swept away by a new love. Once, Uparichara, the king of Chedi, ventured deep into the forest, hunting for weeks on end. During this time, he fathered a child with a fisher girl. She bore twins, a boy and a girl, whom she named Matsiraja and Matsigandhi. The king took the boy with him and left the girl with the fisher folk. Raised among them, she came to be known as Matsigandhi, meaning smelling of fish. Matsigandhi grew into a dusky, striking woman. The chief of the fisher folk, Dasa, raised her with care. One day, the ashram of Parashara, a sage known for his wisdom and realization, was attacked, leaving him severely injured. Escaping his assailants, he made his way, limping and in pain, to a small island where the fisherfolk resided. Seeing his condition, they took him in, entrusting him to the care of Matsigandhi. Naturally drawn to Parashara's immense knowledge and presence, Matsigandhi felt a deep connection to him. Throughout her life, she had grappled with her place in the world, watching her twin brother live in a palace while she remained among fisherfolk. She hoped that by associating with the sage, she might rise beyond her circumstances. Their connection deepened on the secluded island, and she bore him a son. Born on the island, he was named Dwaipayana. Because of his dark complexion, he was also called Krishna. In later years, Krishna Dwaipayana would be known as Veda Vyasa, the compiler of the Vedas and narrator of the Mahabharata. Before Parashara departed, he bestowed upon Matsyagandhi a unique boon. Her fishy odor vanished, replaced by a divine fragrance unknown in this world. She now carried an otherworldly scent, like a flower from the heavens, and came to be called Satyavati, smelling of truth. Her fragrance became her singular charm. One day, the king Shantanu saw Satyavati and fell deeply in love. He approached Dasa, her foster father, to ask for her hand in marriage. Sensing an opportunity, Dasa said, I will consent to the marriage only if Satyavati's children will inherit the Kuru throne. Shantanu, already having crowned his son Devavratha as the future king, refused the condition, explaining that Devavratha was a perfect choice to lead the Kuru kingdom. Despite his best efforts, Shantanu could not get Satyavati out of his mind. Enamored by her fragrance and presence, he lost interest in ruling and withdrew from the kingdom's affairs. Observing his father's changed demeanor, Devavratha questioned him, but Shantanu could not bring himself to explain. The dutiful son then sought out the royal charioteer, who revealed that his father's demeanor had changed after visiting Dasa's home. Determined to uncover the truth, Devavratha visited Dasa. Dasa explained the situation. Shantanu wanted Satyavati, but her children would have to be the heirs to the throne. With resolve, Devavratha proclaimed, I renounce my right to the throne. Satyavati's children shall inherit the kingdom. Skeptical, Dasa warned that Devavratha might later have children who would vie for the throne. In response, Devavratha made an even more solemn vow. He would never marry or have children, thus ensuring that Satyavati's lineage would ascend. The act was seen as unimaginably harsh, and people came to call him Bhishma for his intense self-sacrifice. Only then did Dasa consent, allowing Shantanu to marry Satyavati. Shantanu's desire for youth and vitality led him to take from his son what was precious, just as Yayati once took the youth of his son. With Satyavati, Shantanu had two sons, Chitrangada and Vichitravirya. Chitrangada, bold and brimming with pride, ventured one day into the forest, where he encountered a powerful Gandharva who also bore the name Chitrangada. When the Gandharva inquired, "Who are you?" the young prince responded defiantly, "I am Chitrangada." The Gandharva laughed and said, "How dare you use my name? I am Chitrangada. You must change yours, as you are unworthy of it." The young prince, fueled by pride, retorted, "How dare you question my name? Let us fight to settle this. My father named me Chitrangada, and I shall keep it." They clashed, and soon the prince lay lifeless. With Chitrangada gone, only Vichitravirya remained. His name, meaning strange masculinity, hinted at his nature, one that was unusual or hindered. Vichitravirya was unwilling or unable to take a wife, and in that era, the absence of heirs was of utmost concern. A king needed sons to secure his lineage, for without one, the kingdom's future hung in jeopardy. As it stood, the Kuru dynasty faced a standstill. Chitrangada was dead, Bhishma had taken a vow of celibacy, and Vichitravirya showed no interest in marriage. During this time, the king of Kashi announced a Swayamvara for his 3 daughters, a royal ceremony where princesses chose their husbands. But no invitation was extended to the Kuru house, as the king doubted Vichitravirya's suitability. Bhishma, loyal to his family, could not bear the insult and resolved to attend the Swayamvara uninvited. In ancient tradition, a Swayamvara granted a woman the right to select her own husband among gathered suitors. The 3 daughters of the Kashi king, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, prepared to make their choices. Amba, already in love with King Salva, intended to garland him as her chosen partner. As she approached Salva to signify her choice, Bhishma arrived at the gathering. Despite his known celibacy, the warriors taunted him, suggesting he was there to claim a bride. Angered by the ridicule, Bhishma seized all 3 daughters and set off for Hastinapur, defeating Salva and all other challengers in battle. On the journey, Amba pleaded with Bhishma, explaining her love for Salva, and insisted she could not be taken this way. Bhishma replied, "You belong to the Kuru dynasty now." When she asked him to marry her, Bhishma refused, saying she was destined for Vichitravirya. But Vichitravirya refused Amba, citing her garland for another, and took only Ambika and Ambalika as his wives. Heartbroken, Amba asked Bhishma to return her to Salva, and Bhishma agreed. But when Amba approached Salva, he rejected her, saying, "I do not accept charity from anyone. Bhishma defeated me, and I will not accept his gift as my wife." Rejected by Salva and denied marriage by Vichitravirya, Amba returned to Hastinapur, pleading with Bhishma to marry her and repair her honor. Yet, bound by his vow of celibacy and his loyalty to the kingdom, Bhishma refused. Devastated and abandoned, Amba left, her fate uncertain, with no husband, no family to return to, and no place to call her own. In a time when a woman's life was defined by her roles, she faced an uncertain future, lost and desolate. Amba's sorrow transformed, first to despair, then to desperation, anger, and finally a fierce thirst for revenge. Determined, she wandered in search of anyone willing to challenge Bhishma, but his reputation as an unmatched warrior discouraged all who heard her plea. The legendary Bhishma, blessed by his father, King Shantanu, held the power to choose his moment of death, a formidable gift granted to him in recognition of his lifelong vow of celibacy. This blessing, along with Bhishma's skill, left him invincible, ensuring no one dared oppose him. Undeterred, Amba sought out Parashurama, Bhishma's own teacher in the art of war. Parashurama, moved by her plight, promised to intercede. He called for Bhishma, who came at once, showing his reverence by prostrating before his former guru. Parashurama demanded that Bhishma break his vow and marry Amba. However, Bhishma, though bound by respect for his teacher, refused, declaring that his vow of celibacy was unbreakable, even in the face of death. In this era, a person's word was considered sacred. Laws were few, and vows were regarded as the highest form of commitment. Thus, Bhishma's unyielding stance stemmed from a deep moral code, which emphasized keeping one's word at all costs. Parashurama, who himself had obeyed every command given by his own father, was enraged by Bhishma's defiance. The teacher and student engaged in a fierce duel, both equally matched in skill and spirit. Days passed without a victor, and finally, Parashurama, realizing he could not prevail over Bhishma, admitted defeat and instructed Amba to seek her vengeance elsewhere. Desperate and determined, Amba retreated to the Himalayas, where she performed rigorous austerities, calling upon Karthikeya, the warrior son of Shiva. When he finally appeared, she begged him to slay Bhishma. But Karthikeya, who had long renounced violence, offered her a different solution. A lotus garland imbued with the power to bring about Bhishma's death, if someone would wear it. Armed with this enchanted garland, Amba traveled from village to village, pleading for a champion. Yet, even with the garland, no one dared confront Bhishma. She finally reached King Drupada's court, only to be met with further rejection. Despairing, she hung the garland in Drupada's palace and returned to the mountains, hoping that one day someone would wear it and fulfill her wish for vengeance. Amba's journey of penance continued. She remained in the Himalayas, withering into a figure of skin and bone, calling upon Shiva himself. At last, Shiva appeared before her, but rather than granting her immediate revenge, he offered her a prophecy. In her next life, he promised she would be the one to slay Bhishma. When she expressed concern that she might not remember her past life, Shiva assured her she would, and the sweetness of revenge would not be lost. Meanwhile, in Hastinapur, the throne faced a crisis. Following Vichitravirya's untimely death, Queen Mother Satyavati summoned Vyasa, her son from a previous marriage, to perform the ancient Niyoga ritual to preserve the Kuru dynasty. Satyavati's daughters-in-law, Ambika and Ambalika, bore Vyasa's children, but not without complications. Ambika's fear during their union resulted in a blind son, Dritharashtra, and Ambalika's pale complexion led to the birth of a frail son, Pandu. Concerned for the future of Hastinapur, Satyavati asked Vyasa for a third son through another servant woman who came to known as Vidura, leading to a lineage fraught with complex destinies and power struggles, a history intertwined with the legacy of Amba and her undying thirst for justice. In the lineage of Yayati's sons, we find two prominent lines, one descended from Puru and another from his brother Yadu. Unlike Puru's kingdom, Yadu ventured south to the region around the present-day Mathura. The people here were governed by councils rather than a king. Yadu joined the council of the Naga tribe, into which he married, having been cursed by his father never to be a king. Over time, these tribes came to be known collectively as the Yadavas, with Yadu emerging as the council's chief. Generations later, Kamsa, a Yadava and a fierce warrior, disrupted this traditional council structure. Rejected by the Yadavas as an illegitimate son due to his mother's tragic fate, Kamsa allied with Jarasandha, a powerful eastern king. With Jarasandha's support, Kamsa dismissed the council, crowned himself, and for the first time, the Yadava clan had a king. Kamsa's rule brought hardship to his people. His cruelty peaked when he learned of a prophecy that Devaki's eighth child would end his life. Enraged, he imprisoned Devaki and her husband, Vasudeva, killing each of their children at birth. When the seventh child, Balarama, was born, Vasudeva managed to smuggle him across the Yamuna to be raised by Rohini, Vasudeva's other wife. When Devaki's eighth child, Krishna, was born, Vasudeva spirited him away to Gokula, exchanging him for a girl born to Yashoda, wife of Nanda. Kamsa discovered the girl, but was unable to harm her. She revealed herself as a divine messenger, warning that his true nemesis still lived. Furious, Kamsa ordered the massacre of all newborns in the area. Yet Krishna, the destined child, survived and thrived. In Hastinapur, Pandu became the king since his elder brother Dritharashtra was blind by birth. Vasudeva's sister Kunti, originally named Pritha, had a unique role to play. Adopted by her uncle Kunti Bhoja, she later married Pandu of the Kuru clan. An unfortunate curse upon Pandu prevented him from fathering children, a predicament that threatened the royal lineage. Disappointed by this, Pandu went to live in forest along with Kunti and Madri, making Dritharashtra the king. Kunti then disclosed a secret. Sage Durvasa had given her a mantra allowing her to summon gods. Through this gift, she bore 3 sons, Yudhishthira by invoking Yamadharma, Bhima by calling Vayu, and Arjuna through Indra. Pandu's second wife, Madri, envious of Kunti's sons, pleaded for the same privilege. Kunti used the mantra on her behalf, and Madri bore twin sons, Nakula and Sahadeva, by summoning the Ashvins, divine horsemen. Thus, the 5 Pandavas, Yudhishthira, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva, grew up as sons of Pandu, raised in the forest, but destined to become central figures in the unfolding events of the Mahabharata. These brothers, each marked by unique gifts and divine heritage, would one day return to claim their rightful place in the Kuru dynasty. Dritharashtra was blind from birth, but his wife Gandhari chose to blindfold herself, sharing in her husband's darkness. Driven by a fervent desire to secure the throne for their lineage, Dritharashtra longed for Gandhari to bear him a son before the other wives of the Kuru brothers had children. He showered Gandhari with affectionate words, hoping they would hasten the arrival of a son. Soon, Gandhari became pregnant, but months passed, turning to years. Still, no child was born. Tension mounted as news arrived. Pandu's wife had delivered a son, Yudhishthira, the firstborn of the new generation, destined to inherit the throne. Dritharashtra and Gandhari sank into despair. Months turned into nearly 2 years, and Gandhari, in her anguish, questioned the nature of the life within her. In frustration, she struck her stomach, even instructing a servant to beat it further. Finally, she aborted, and a strange, dark piece of flesh emerged. It bore no resemblance to human flesh, appearing ominous and unsettling. Terrified, the citizens of Hastinapur witnessed unnatural omens, screaming jackals, wild animals roaming the streets, bats flying in daylight. Alarmed, the sages abandoned the city. Dritharashtra, bewildered, turned to his advisor Vidura, who warned of impending doom. But Dhritarashtra's yearning for an heir was unwavering, and he dismissed Vidura's fears. Gandhari sought out sage Vyasa, who had once promised her 100 sons as a reward for her kindness. She reminded him of this blessing, grieving over the dark, shapeless lump she had delivered. In response, Vyasa instructed that the flesh be divided into 100 pieces and placed in earthen pots filled with sesame oil and herbs. He assured her that she would indeed have 100 sons and added a small fragment to an extra pot, foretelling the birth of a daughter. In time, the first pot opened, revealing a large, intense baby boy with unblinking, serpent-like eyes. More unnatural omens filled the city, and Vidura, sensing grave peril, urged Dhritarashtra to end the child's life, warning that this son, if allowed to live, would bring ruin to the Kuru dynasty. But Dhritarashtra's attachment was too great, and he rejected Vidura's advice. Thus, Duryodhana, the child with the serpent eyes, was raised alongside his siblings, while the Pandava brothers, Yudhishthira and his 4 younger siblings, grew up in the forest under the tutelage of sages, becoming strong, wise, and skilled warriors. Meanwhile, Pandu, father to the Pandavas, faced a unique struggle. Cursed to die if he approached his wives with desire, he led a life of restraint and spiritual pursuits. Yet, one fateful day, he lost control upon seeing his second wife, Madri, by a river. Overcome by desire, he approached her and, as foretold, died in her arms. Consumed by guilt, Madri joined him on the funeral pyre, leaving Pandu's first wife Kunti to raise the 5 sons. After 16 years, Kunti led her sons back to Hastinapur. Duryodhana, who had long presumed his inheritance, grew fiercely jealous at the news of their return. Consumed by envy, he roused his brothers, especially his fierce and loyal sibling Dushasana, to oppose their cousins. As the people of Hastinapur welcomed the Pandavas with admiration and affection, Duryodhana saw in them a threat to his dreams of power. Amidst the gathered throng, Dritharashtra and the Kuru elders stood, filled with mixed emotions. Dritharashtra, who had always depended on Pandu's strength and guidance, felt conflicted as he realized that the arrival of the Pandavas threatened the ambitions he held for his own sons.